When is a victory not a victory? Well, when gender-critical fascists are lying to falsify an atmosphere of strength on their part. Indeed, this is a very common practice among the larger gender-critical crowd, and today's story regarding the BMA's upcoming review of the Cass Review is no different. But before we discuss that, a quick content warning for the following: transmisia, psychological torture, suicide, child death, and genocide. If our work has helped you, please consider supporting us via Patreon so that we can keep the channel running. You can also help us by liking, commenting, and sharing our work on social media. Hi there, my name is Ethel Thurston, she, her, they, them, and we're here to talk about the ways in which gender-critical fascists, such as Hannah Barnes, writer for The New Statesman, have taken to misportraying a recent decision made by the British Medical Association regarding the Cass Review. To give a quick summary, the Cass Review is an ideological pamphlet masquerading as a medical report. As shown in our video, exposing the dangers of anti-trans fascism, regarding the Cass Review and Labour's downfall, the Cass Review suffered numerous flaws, most notably in its fundamental ignorance of research methodology and endocrinology. Not only is Dr. Hilary Cass not an expert in trans healthcare and child endocrinology, but her ignorance of the subject is glaringly obvious. Perhaps the best example of this can be seen in her demanding experiments be carried out on puberty blockers for trans children, experiments which were found to be impossible to conduct on puberty blockers for cis children suffering precocious or early onset puberty more than 20 years ago. That's how bad she is, professionally speaking. She also lied about the system of review she used. Cass claimed that she was using grade, however, her actions in dismissing all mid and low quality evidence is at complete odds with said system, with the guidelines themselves clearly stating that, quote, although higher quality evidence is more likely to be associated with strong recommendations than lower quality evidence, a particular level of quality does not imply a particular strength of recommendation. Sometimes low or very low quality evidence can lead to strong recommendation. End quote. She also straight up ignored what high quality evidence she did find, such as one study that concluded, quote, transgender adolescents show poorer psychological well-being before treatment, but show similar or better psychological functioning compared with cisgender peers from the general population after the start of specialized transgender care involving puberty suppression. End quote. Emphasis added by me. This was part of another review that, along with said high-quality study, found 26 studies of moderate and thus acceptable quality, all of which, again, were completely ignored by Hilary Cass without explanation. Now, since it's publishing, we actually have a possible reason for this. As noted by two of her former colleagues, quote, Dr. Cass expressed her dismay and shock at the practice of medical transition to one of us before she started this review, and recommended strongly that we read the gender-critical polemic Irreversible Damage on the subject. She is described on the Cass Review website as an expert who came in with no fixed views. We will leave the reader to draw their own conclusions. End quote. Emphasis added by me. Irreversible Damage is an anti-trans propaganda piece that presents all trans men as weak-minded girls who have been duped into believing that they are trans. This is part of a fascist ideology that views said girls as a sexual resource that must be guarded from a Jewish cabal that is supposedly carrying out said indoctrination in an effort to reduce white fertility. That is the ideological nature of the piece Hilary Cass was caught promoting. So she was already set against the trans community before she was selected for her position. This needs to be kept in mind, especially in light of the fact that a Freedom of Information request revealed that only one person was ever considered for the post, that being Hilary Cass. This, by the way, tracks with a post made to Twitter by the now former Minister for Women and Equalities, Kemi Badenoch, in which she openly declared the following about how the Cass Review was able to take place and reach the conclusions that it did. Quote, The third reason was having gender-critical men and women in the UK government, holding the positions that mattered most in equalities and health. You only need to look at what the SNP did in Scotland to see what would have happened had we not intervened. The Cass Review would never have been commissioned under a Labour government. Labour did not want to know. We had incredible opposition from the system on everything. It was when the ministers changed that everything changed." End quote. Openly confessing what every trans person already knew, that the then Tory government had used corrupt means to stack the deck in favour of gender-critical fascism, allowing them to hire Hilary Cass, again a non-professional in the relevant fields, as a medical hitman. Sadly, none of this mattered, with the Tory government going ahead and using the review to ban puberty blockers in the UK, a ban that Keir Starmer's Red Tories, formerly known as Labour, upheld. Of course, this degree of open corruption and the pseudoscience it spawned didn't go unnoticed, and was called out by the international medical community. That is why, back in July of this year, the British Medical Association announced plans to critically assess the Cass Review, with the BMA publishing an article back in July titled "BMA to undertake an evaluation of the Cass Review on gender identity services for children and young people." The article states that, quote, "Members of the BMA's council recently voted in favour of a motion which asked the association to publicly critique the Cass Review after doctors and academics in several countries, including the UK, voiced concern about weaknesses in the methodologies used in the review and problems arising from the implementation of some of the recommendations. A task and finish group established by the BMA's Chair of Council Professor Philip Banfield, who will also appoint the group's chairperson, will pay particular attention to the methodology used to underpin the report's recommendations. There have been ongoing discussions within the BMA about the Cass Review since it was published. Before that, the BMA attended meetings with Dr. Cass when the review was being written. These, together with the Council's wishes, have helped to shape what will be a detailed, evidence-led piece of work." End quote. The announcement was met with praise both by the UK trans community and the international medical community. One group that wasn't happy, however, were gender-critical fascists. Which brings us to the main topic of today's video, and that is a Reddit post made to the Doctors UK subreddit in which someone shared Hannah Barnes' article titled "The BMA Turns Away from Rejecting the Cass Report," the response to which has been pretty harrowing. One user stated that it was the, quote, "right decision. The Cass report has fuck all to do with doctors' pay or working conditions and is therefore not relevant. Time to spend some time and energy on more important things." End quote. To which someone replied with, quote, "Absolutely. Would have been bizarre to spend members' fees on this." End quote. Another comment stated that it was a, quote, "good decision. The BMA should be neutral on everything that isn't to do with pay and conditions. If people want to have their own pet projects, great, but don't use my union for them." End quote. To which someone else replied with, quote, "Agreed. The Cass report isn't a union issue. If people have a problem with the Cass review, then they should look to see what the relevant royal colleges are saying about the topic. BMA should stay out of it." End quote. Another comment added that, quote, "Excellent news. The BMA should not be used for personal political grievances of certain members." End quote. And another stated, quote, "Correct. I was not consulted on this, therefore this view did not represent all the members' views. I couldn't believe it when I saw it." End quote. And so on and so forth. Point is, numerous people, including those professing to be medical professionals and members of the British Medical Association, have been led to believe that the BMA has stopped its review of the Cass review and its implementation. Only thing is, that's not what happened. A fact that simply reading beyond the headline would have told them, with the subheading admitting that, quote, "The doctors' union has voted to retain a neutral position on the issue," end quote. Except this was always the case, as seen in the BMA article shown earlier. Indeed, reading through the article, I couldn't find anything of substance that could accurately be described as the BMA backing down or turning away. All I could find was them merely reaffirming their commitment to carry out an empirically grounded review of the Cass review. Okay, well, if the headline isn't accurate, why run it? The simple answer is manufacturing consent. Gender-critical fascism, as with all fascism, is reliant on creating an atmosphere of power in order to operate unchallenged, and headlines like these act as a means to achieve that. Gender-critical fascists are aware that most people won't apply a critical lens to said headline, keeping in mind that it's the first and often only thing many people will read when they see the link being shared in places such as Reddit. Therefore, said headlines can be used to create a false narrative. By publishing these sorts of headlines, it can give the impression that gender-critical fascists are in control, that institutions, such as the British Medical Association, can't help but give way to them, giving the false impression that said gender-critical fascist position is just that solid. And we've seen this sort of thing before. In 2022, Marie-Louise Volbrecht of Germany replied to a Twitter thread in which a poster tried to deny the facts that trans people were victims of the Holocaust, with Volbrecht stating, quote, "I hate this narrative. It mocks the true victims of the Nazi crimes," end quote. This led both individuals and groups, such as the German Society for Trans Identity and Intersexuality, to start tweeting the hashtag #MarieDeniesNaziCrimes. Now, originally, Volbrecht had managed to get an emergency ruling by the Cologne Regional Court in August of 2022, which decided that the hashtag should be stopped until they could further investigate the matter, a decision that the anti-trans crowd began presenting as a definitive victory, with one gender-critical writer running the headline, "Biologist Volbrecht wins in court," along with a subheading that, quote, "Berlin doctoral student Marie-Louise Volbrecht has achieved her first legal victory against trans activists. They are no longer allowed to claim that the biologist denies Nazi crimes," end quote. This was not the case, however. What was actually happening was the Cologne Regional Court was gathering experts, namely historians who specialize in studying the Holocaust, before reaching a final decision. That's why, after listening to expert witnesses and evidence on the topic, the Cologne Regional Court overturned its original decision in November of 2022, legally ruling that Volbrecht's actions could be accurately described as a denial of Nazi crimes. Of course, the people who had gone on and on about the emergency ruling being the final say suddenly went quiet, refusing to report on the final ruling. They did so because it gave them this atmosphere of power, this narrative that they took on the trans community regarding historical accuracy and won, painting the trans community as this delusional and hypersensitive collective. That's what this article in the Statesman regarding the BMA reads as to me, only this time relating to medical science instead of history. That's why it's so important to call out said misinformation, to deny fascists the ability to invent this false narrative. It will certainly be interesting to see how gender-critical fascists react, or indeed, if they react, when the BMA publishes its findings. Which just leaves us one last thing we need to do, and that's debunk the most popular objection to the BMA's review of the Cass review, at least on this forum. I am of course referring to the idea that the BMA should just stay out of things since it has nothing to do with wages. And indeed, it is true that the BMA is a trade union that primarily focuses on advocating on behalf of practitioners, but that is not its sole purpose. Just taking a quick look at the BMA's mission statement, specifically their vision, and we can see how it states that they hope the BMA, quote, can influence the advancement of health and the profession, end quote. To that effect, they note how leading is one of their values, stating that they are, quote, an influential leader in supporting the profession and improving the health of the UK, end quote. That is why the BMA has historically weighed in on so many topics pertaining to medicine, including abortion, assisted dying, and COVID regulations, to name a few. In doing so, the BMA advocates not just for practitioners, but also their patients' well-being, something I would argue is a noble cause. I certainly want a doctor who wants the best for me and the rest of their patients, and I imagine that's the same for most people. This is relevant to the Cass review and the subsequent ban on puberty blockers, seeing how there is a known cost of human life involved with barring said essential medications. Indeed, since the Cass review was published, no less than 2 separate NHS practitioners have come forward, alerting the public to the fact that they pleaded with both the Tory government and Hilary Cass with regards to the Tavistock 16. That is the 16 children who took their own lives following the 2021 ban on puberty blockers as a result of the, now overturned, Bell v Tavistock case. This means that both the UK government and Hilary Cass knew that such a ban was likely to result in child death, yet have opted to go ahead and do so anyway. And whilst the doctors posting to the subreddit might not care about the deaths of children, the fact remains many doctors do and has subsequently been threatened by the UK government, who have made it clear that prescribing said life-saving medications to trans people is a criminal offence, even though those very same medications are still being prescribed to cis children, demonstrating that they are known to be safe. The government has taken away an effective and life-saving means to help trans children, hampering the ability of good doctors to do their jobs. And this isn't the only place we see such coercive control. Indeed, the whistleblowers noted that as multiple doctors begged the UK government to have a public discussion on the Tavistock 16, the then Tory government preemptively threatened them over leaking news of said deaths. So even if you don't give a shit about children's lives, in which case I seriously think you're in the wrong profession, the BMA is advocating for doctors in fighting for their right to prescribe essential medications, not to mention raise an alarm regarding unnecessary child mortality. Both of these things are vital to protecting patient care, and the very reason doctors exist in the first place. Another way the Cass review affects all practitioners is through the impact of pseudoscience and corruption in medicine on the public's perception. Something I have seen said of Hilary Cass is that she is the Andrew Wakefield of this generation, publishing a pseudoscientific report that has been jumped on by the media and used to promote a course of action that is life-ending to many children whilst being permanently disabling to many more. This not only has an immediate impact on those being denied said essential care, it also carries with it the potential to seriously harm the public's relation with the NHS and indeed all medical institutions. Hilary Cass's paper, which is antithetical to the very principles upon which medicine was founded, reflects badly on every single doctor who merely nods along in willful ignorance when they should be scrambling at the opportunity to put the record straight. Though what do you think? Can you see any other reason gender-critical fascists might be misportraying the BMA's actions? What are your thoughts about the Reddit post and the subreddit in which it was found? What are your thoughts on the BMA and its advocacy work for patients? Did you notice something I missed? If so, be sure to let me know in the comments down below. And if you appreciate what we do here and want to keep us running, please consider becoming one of the wonderful patrons who make our work possible. You could also make a one-time donation via PayPal or Super Thanks on YouTube. On that note, we just like to thank the following people: Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Goddess Alita, Sosh Daniels, Flynn, and Higgins the Seagull. And from myself, Adita and Levi, take care now.